Crochet for Beginners, a simple, concise and complete guide to crochet, written by Angie Young, narrated by Catherine Carter. Congratulations on your purchase of Crochet for Beginners, a simple, concise and complete guide to crochet. This book has been crafted specially as a means to help you learn how to master the art of crochet. This beautiful yarn-based craft is one that was largely cherished throughout our history, but had faded from the mainstream world of artistic interest for some time. Now, people such as yourself are recalling the beauty of this art form and are seeking to learn how you can learn to use it in your own life. You will be happy to know that once you master the art of crochet, it becomes extremely easy to crochet just about any pattern you may see. In fact, you may even jump out on a crafty whim and start making your own patterns. While this book isn't designed to get you started on making patterns, it is designed to get you reading them. This book contains a significant amount of easy-to-understand information that is going to help you master the art of crochet. In fact, if you follow these instructions, you can probably even master it by the end of the weekend. Crochet is not a difficult craft once you know what you are doing, and it is somewhat like riding a bicycle. Once you learn, you always know how. You will likely find that crochet is even easier than you thought it would be. The best part about crochet is that it is one of the most versatile art forms there are. Unlike other yarn crafts, crochet doesn't manage several stitches at once. It only manages one, which gives you a significant amount of freedom when it comes to creating virtually anything you desire. It is also an easy craft that you can do while you're relaxing in other ways too, such as watching TV. Once you learn how to crochet, you will probably never want to stop. It is an exciting and addicting craft that has so many options and outcomes. You can make anything from clothes to toys, accessories to house decor, and so much more. The opportunities are endless, and at least 90% of them are absolutely beautiful to look at. Plus, it is a great type of craft you can make and share with friends and family as gifts. Truly, it is a phenomenal craft overall. If you are ready to learn more about crochet and what you can do to get started, then you are ready to dive on into this book and start reading. Please note that this book has been crafted with the beginner's knowledge level in mind, so it is very informative and breaks everything down to be easily read and accomplished. Take your time and you will master it, and please enjoy. Chapter 1. About crochet. Crochet is a yarn-based craft that used to make many people think about their grandmas and their big basket of yarn. Nowadays, however, it has re-emerged as a popular craft form with people of all ages and genders wanting to learn how they can crochet. The craft itself is so versatile and easy, yet relaxing and calming, that it makes complete sense as to why it is so popular among all of the generations and genders. It is no longer just your grandma's craft. No, crochet has taken a firm hold, and it is now an art form that is adored by just about everybody. The history of crochet. Not surprisingly, the extensive history of crochet is not completely known by modern-day mankind. As far as we know, the earliest recorded crochet patterns were first printed in the year 1924. However, we know that many were written and shared since well before then, mainly by women. Originally, this skill was completely word of mouth. There are theories that state that this craft was an evolved art form that was traditionally used in Iran, South America, or China. However, there has been no decisive evidence discovered implying that the craft was being performed before its popularity spiked in Europe during the early 19th century. As you have already learned, the first printed copy of a crochet pattern was from 1824. These patterns typically were only printed for luxury items, like purses that were to be made of gold and silver silk thread. Unlike modern patterns which are accurate, these early patterns were not and would have the person crocheting the patterns creating slight variations each time. At this time, the person crocheting was not actually supposed to rely on the pattern itself. Rather, the pattern was a suggestion or guide, and they were intended to look at the picture and recreate the picture. The reader had to guess and hope that they had chosen the right number of stitches in order to ensure that the bags would turn out perfectly. Much later, during the 1960s and 1970s, the art of crochet took off as a free-form art. That is, people could use it as a means to create virtually anything. We can see the result of this expansion of the craft with many three-dimensional sculptures, rugs and tapestries, or articles of clothing that have abstract and realistic designs and scenes crocheted right into them. In modern times, crochet crafters have become obsessed with detail and intricate designs that are eye-catching and impressive. People are no longer using the old, inaccurate, picture-based references to create their art. Instead, they are following incredible patterns and creating incredible pieces of art. Some still make variations of the original pattern, but these days the variations are intentional. What crochet really is. As you likely already know, crochet is a yarn craft where people use a hook to create a series of stitches in order to design an item. The item range is vast, and you can crochet just about anything out of yarn. The opportunities include but are not limited to kitchen accessories, clothing, wearable accessories, home decor, toys for children, and more. This craft has been popularized likely due to how easy and versatile it is, and the number of things you can make from it. The word crochet itself was derived from the French word croche, which literally translates to the word hook. Similar to knitting, crocheting stitches are created by the crafter pulling yarn through an active loop. Unlike knitting, which has several active loops at once, however, crochet only has one at a time. This makes it even more versatile and easy to manage than knitting. Using crochet stitches, you can develop a variety of textures, patterns, and shapes simply through varying the tension, changing your stitch style, and dropping and adding stitches. In crochet, there really is no restriction or limit on the type of materials you can use. There have been many accounts in history where people from all over the world have used several different types of materials, including stuff like grass, wool, thread, wire, rope, silk, and even hair. The number of materials that have been used are extensive, and each one has had its own purpose throughout history. Sharing the crochet craft. Originally, crochet was shared verbally only. Friends and family would tell each other what to do, and then the other would go and do it. Unlike modern patterns that are printed on paper, in books, or on websites, they created their patterns by looking at a project and copying it. At the time, they would turn out incredibly inaccurate replications many times, as they didn't have the accuracy we have today. Because of the inaccuracy, crocheting underwent an evolution which included a series of stitches and, eventually, abbreviations to be officially created. Originally, they would create specific stitches that would be learned and then shared throughout houses. It was shared by providing each household with small samples that could be kept as a main reference. After, they started stitching these onto scraps of paper to form small books that would be passed around through women's groups. Some of these sample scrapbooks date back to the late 1800s, with some still being used by groups of nuns in Spain. Nowadays, crochet is shared much differently than it once was. Whereas before it was verbal and by direct samples, nowadays it is shared through text. You can find individual patterns, books, or magazines containing patterns, and several other patterns that are available through the internet. The options for finding patterns are easy these days, and the number of patterns available is limitless. No matter what level of crocheting knowledge you may possess, you will find it incredibly easy to discover a pattern that will be easy for you to complete. As you can see, crochet has been a well-loved art form for many years. As far as we know, the evolution of the modern crocheting forms has been in practice for nearly 200 years. However, There is evidence that indicates that crocheting has been around for much longer than any of us really know. This tried and tested art form is an excellent method for creating just about anything, no matter what you are seeking to develop. It is, as previously mentioned, a free-form art, which means you really can go anywhere with it. The only question is, where will crochet take you? Chapter 2. The Tools You Need. Crocheting is really simple to get started. In general, there are only 3 tools you need, and one more that is handy to have on hand. These tools are all that is required to help you start crocheting right away. While you may find that there are several other tools available, they are not necessary and often just make completing certain jobs easier. Jobs which, if you really need to, can be done manually without the help of the additional tools. As a beginner, you won't need to worry about these additional tools. In fact, learning to do it yourself first is best if you want to master this art form to the truest of the word mastery. With that, read on to discover exactly what you will need to begin. Scissors. Possibly the easiest and most often forgotten tool you will need is scissors. These help you cut your yarn when you are done, or when you are stitching between yarns. Don't forget to have these handy so you can tie off your projects. Yarn. It's a yarn craft after all, so you are going to need some yarn. Pay attention to the weight of the yarn, as a thicker, heavier yarn is going to need a bigger needle than a thinner, lighter yarn. In general, a good place to start is with standard acrylic wool. This yarn is medium weight and will be easiest to work with as a beginner. Additionally, it doesn't have stray fibres like other yarns like 100% pure wool would. Eventually, you can start crocheting lighter and heavier items, but as a beginner, it's best to stay with something middleweight and easy. Crochet hook. Although this is the most important part of the entire crocheting process, as it is the part you need to actually crochet, you should wait to pick this part until after you have already picked your yarn. The weight of your yarn will help you determine the size of needle you need. Lighter yarns will require smaller needles, 0.25 millimeters and up, whereas heavier yarns will require heavier needles, 7.5 millimeters and up. For the acrylic wool, you should use something between a 4.5 millimeter to 6 millimeter needle. The size of the needle you choose will affect your tension, so be aware when you are purchasing your needle that this will be affected. Most patterns have suggestions on what needle you should use to get the proper gauge. As you may have expected, smaller needles will equal to a tighter tension, and larger needles will create a looser tension. Pattern. When you are just practicing, you can crochet samples. Samples are just smaller squares that allow you to practice different stitches, tensions, and other crocheting skills. However, you are going to want to pick a pattern to move on to once you are comfortable, so you should go ahead and grab yourself a pattern you would like to crochet. Most patterns are rated from beginner to advanced, so it should be easy to identify what ones you can do. Most beginner projects include easier things like toques and hats, scarves, dishcloths, cup cozies, and other simple projects. It is recommended that you do beginner projects for some time until you are consistently getting accurate results from your craft. However, if you choose to jump into a more advanced pattern, you can always remove the hook and undo all of the stitches if you don't like your results. Once you have acquired your items, you can start practicing your crochet skills. Read on to the next chapter to find out how. Chapter 3. Chain stitch and single stitch. The easiest stitches to complete in crochet are the chain stitch and the single stitch. These are all that is required for you to create a consistent square, toque, or whatever else you desire to create. In fact, you can make many things with these 2 stitches alone. In this chapter, you are going to learn to make a sample square with these stitches. Holding your crochet hook. Before you learn how to do the chain stitch or the single stitch, you are going to need to learn how to properly hold your crochet hook. Which hand you use will vary depending on which is your dominant hand. so this description will be for right-hand dominant people. If you are left-hand dominant, simply reverse this method. So, to start, you will want to have your crochet hook in your right hand and your project in your left hand. There are many ways to hold your crochet hook, but the best way is to hold it like it is a fork. This will make it easy to twist your wrist and maneuver your hook to make your stitches. The slip knot. The slip knot is the first knot you need to do, as this is the knot that will allow you to start your chain stitch. This knot is a type of knot which forms a loop that can be opened more or pulled tighter to close it up, depending on what tension you want to have your project set in. The slip knot is easy, but it can take a few tries to master it. The following list is exactly how you can do it. 1. Take your left index finger and put it straight out. Place the end of the yarn in front of your finger and the ball of yarn on your lap behind your finger. Pull the two strands together underneath your finger using your thumb and middle finger. 2. With your right hand, slip the crochet hook under the loop that is over your finger. Twist your hand so that the yarn twists once, making the end of the yarn and the strand attached to the ball of yarn sit on opposite sides now. The continuous strand of yarn should now be facing you. 3. Using the hook on your needle, grab the continuous strand of yarn and pull it through the loop. Pull to tighten the knot. 4. Now you should be able to hold on to the end of the yarn and pull the loop longer or shorter depending on what you need. Leave the crochet hook in the active loop. The chain stitch. After the slip knot, the chain stitch is one of the most important for you to know. The chain stitch, like the slip knot, is one that you will use in every single project to create your base. This stitch is much easier than the slip knot when it comes to mastery, and you can master it by simply chain stitching several in a row. Before you chain stitch, though, you need to know how to hold the yarn in order to manage your tension. To do so, simply hold your hook in your right hand like a fork, hold the first stitch, the slip knot, in your left hand, and place the continuous strand of yarn over your index finger, gripping it gently between your index and middle finger. Don't grip it too hard, or you will mess up your tension. You want to keep this grip fairly loose and extremely consistent to maintain your tension and prevent your project from having tight and loose areas. Now that you are clear on how to hold the yarn and the needle, you are ready to start your chain stitch. It is very simple to do, and you should be able to master it in no time. Here's how. 1. Holding the project as described above, your hook should have only one loop over the front of it, and the hook should be facing you. 2. Take the hook and slide it under the yarn that is resting over your index finger. You will need to slide it under in the direction that goes away from your knuckle or towards the end of your fingers. 3. Hook the yarn and pull it through the loop that is already on your hook. 4. Done. That's how simple the chain stitch is. Many projects will require you do several in a row, as this is your first line, and it will be used as a base to create the rest of your project. For practice purposes, you can start by creating several of these in a row. Keep going until you're comfortable, then eliminate the stitches. Simply take the hook out and gently pull on the continuous strands of yarn, and they will unravel. Start over from the beginning and chain 20. That means do 20 chain stitches. This is going to be used as the base for your first sample. The single stitch. The next step after creating the chain stitch is to create the single stitch. This is the most basic stitch you can use to build your entire pattern. For many beginners' patterns, they only use the single stitch, none of the other fancier stitches. For your sample square, you are going to use the single stitch to create your square. To start, turn your project around so that you are holding the tail in your fingers and your index and thumb are gripping the most recent stitch you created. Then, follow the simple instructions below. 1. With your project turned around, you should see the loops that your chain stitches created. Each stitch should have a loop loose enough for you to insert your hook into it. 2. Start with the stitch closest to your needle, or the second to last one you just made. Do not go back through the same stitch you made, or you will be adding stitches. Insert your hook in the loop and grab the yarn the same way you were doing when you created your chain stitch. Insert the hook under the yarn that is over the index finger, going away from your knuckle or towards your fingertips. Pull the yarn through the loop of the old stitch, but not the original loop on your hook that was created from the last chain stitch you made. 3. Once again, go under the yarn that rests over your index finger in the same way as you have in the past, from knuckle to fingertip. Hook the yarn and this time pull it through both loops on your needle. Then you are done. You have created a single stitch. You can practice the single stitch as much as you need to master it. For your sample, you will want to go all the way until the end of the chain. Then, turn your project around as you did before and single stitch all the way back to the other end. Do this 20 times over. So you will have 21 lines. Remember, the chain stitch line is one line. Once you reach the end of the 21st line, cut the continuous strands of yarn about 3 inches away from your project. Then, pull it all of the way through your last single stitch and pull tight. For extra hold, you can create a single chain stitch in the last stitch you made, but pull the yarn all the way through, creating a full knot to end your project. Congratulations! You have officially created your first crochet square. Did you find it was easy to do? It really is. If you had difficulty with this project, don't worry. Continue practicing the process of making your sample until you have the outcome you desire, which should be an evenly tensioned project that lays flat on a surface and does not curl or twist around. If it does, it means your tension changed throughout the project. This is a common mistake by beginners and just means that you need more practice. Once you have mastered the process of creating your sample squares, you can go ahead and find a beginner's project. If you opt for a basic project, you will likely only need to use the single stitch. However, if you find that the pattern you've chosen has other types of stitches in them, you can find instructions on those in the next chapter. You are well on your way to creating phenomenal crocheted art. In no time, you will be able to move on from beginners projects to novice projects, and from novice projects to advanced projects. The jumps between the levels generally does not have anything to do with different stitch types or added skills. Rather, it comes from practicing often enough that you can confidently create accurate outcomes consistently. Sometimes, even when you have all of the stitches mastered, the same pattern can come out looking several different ways. This is often the result of simple mistakes such as missed stitches, stitches you have added accidentally, or even tension variations that affected your project. The more you practice crochet, the easier it will be to eliminate these mistakes and move on to bigger and better things. Chapter 4. Different Stitches. While there are many beginners projects that only feature the chain stitch and the single stitch, you are likely going to want to do something different eventually. And even then, many beginners projects feature a variety of different stitches in them. So, if you are looking to do a project that has fancier stitches in it, this is your guide. In this chapter, you are going to learn exactly how you can master all of the other stitches that go into creating fabulous crochet projects. Don't worry about the fancy names, it's really easy. As long as you have mastered the chain stitch and the single stitch, learning anything else will be a breeze. Remember, it's like riding a bike. Slip stitch. A slip stitch is a very easy stitch to do, and it is sometimes required in crocheting projects. For this stitch, you will only make a single loop and will pull the strand all the way through. The following steps will teach you exactly what you need to do to slip stitch when you're crocheting. 1. Start with your sample square or your project if you are working on one. If you are right-handed, hold your project in your left hand and your crochet hook in your right hand. Insert the hook through the next stitch on your row. 2. Grab the continuous strand of yarn and pull it through the stitch and through the active loop on your hook. 3. You have successfully completed the slip stitch. The slip stitch is one of the easiest stitch styles, aside from the chain stitch. You will not need this one often, though it does come in handy when you will need it. It is a good way to close off projects, create smaller areas, or change the texture or shape of your project. Half double crochet stitch. This crochet stitch is a half style of the double crochet. The half double crochet stitch is almost as common as the single stitch, and you will need to know exactly how to do it. This stitch is easy and only requires you to take one additional step from the single stitch that you have already mastered. Here's how you do it. 1. With your hook in your right hand, wrap the yarn over your hook before inserting it into the next stitch on your project. 2. Insert the hook through the next stitch, hook some yarn, and pull it through the stitch. You should now have 3 active loops on your hook. 3. Grab the continuous yarn again and pull it back through all 3 of the active loops on your hook. 4. Done. The half double crochet is easy and helps add density as well as height to your project. It is halfway between a single stitch and a double stitch, hence the name. Double crochet stitch. The double crochet stitch is one step up from a half double crochet and is extremely simple to achieve. You will find this stitch incredibly easy to do, especially since you've already mastered the previous stitches. The following guide will teach you exactly what you need to do in order to master the double crochet stitch. 1. Because of the size of the double crochet, you will need to make sure you pay attention to your yarn so you don't get confused. You will start by wrapping your yarn over the hook and inserting it in the next stitch. 2. Then you will pull yarn through the stitch, leaving you with 3 active loops on your hook. 3. Hook the yarn again and pull it through the first 2 active loops on your hook. You should now have 2 active loops on your hook. 4. Then hook the yarn one more time and pull it through the last 2 hoops. It should leave you with 1 active loop on your hook. You can then repeat this step in the next stitch until you are done. The double crochet can be confusing at first, with so many active loops on your hook. It is important to make sure that the loops don't start crossing over each other or become twisted, as this will make it difficult for you to effectively create the stitches without developing inaccuracies in your project. The more you practice, the easier this will become, which is a good thing because the next step up is a triple crochet stitch. Triple crochet stitch. This stitch may sound hard or confusing, but trust that you will master it in no time. It is a short step up from a double crochet and can be difficult at first, but once you figure it out, you will be whipping out these triple crochet stitches in no time. There are only 2 additional steps up from the double crochet stitch. This stitch adds greater height to your project and can create a greater density too. 1. Start with your project in your left hand and hook in your right. Wrap your yarn over your hook twice so that there are 3 loops on your hook. 2. Insert the hook into the next stitch and hook the yarn. Pull it through the stitch, leaving you with 4 active loops on your hook. 3. Now hook the yarn again and pull it through the first 2 stitches on your hook. You should have 3 active loops now. 4. Again, hook the yarn and pull it through the first 2 stitches on your hook. Now you should have only 2 active loops left. 5. Finally, hook the yarn one more time and pull it through both active loops. Now you should only have 1 active loop on your hook, and you're done. Again, it is important that you do not let the loops get twisted or cross each other, as this will wreck your project and cause it to look warped. This stitch grows a lot taller than the single or double crochets and can expand your project faster. However, be aware that you will not want to interchange single, half double, double and triple crochets, as you will wind up with a different texture on your project that will change the overall appearance. It is best to stick to the appropriate stitches as outlined by your project details. Treble crochet stitch. When you come across the treble stitch in your travels, you may be wondering what you are supposed to do. This stitch is actually no different than the triple crochet stitch. It simply has a different name. If you see the treble stitch in your pattern or decide you would like to practice creating one, simply look back to the instructions for how to create the triple crochet stitch. Double treble crochet stitch. The double treble crochet stitch is a step up from the triple or the treble stitch. Once again, this stitch creates a different height and texture compared to the other stitches you will see. As you may have guessed, the double treble crochet stitch is a lot taller than the triple stitch or anything smaller. In order to do it, here is what you'll need to know. 1. Start by wrapping the yarn over your hook 3 times before you insert the hook into the next working stitch. You should have 4 active loops on your hook. 2. Grab the yarn and pull it through the working stitch, which should leave you with 5 active loops on the hook. 3. Put the yarn over the hook and draw it through the first 2 loops on the hook. You should have 4 active loops now. 4. Then put the yarn over the hook again and draw it through the first 2 loops on the hook. Now you should have 3 active loops. 5. Once again, hook the yarn and draw it through the first 2 loops on the hook. You should have 2 active loops now. 6. Finally, hook the yarn one more time and draw it through the final 2 loops on the hook. You should only have 1 active loop on the hook. You are now done. The double treble crochet stitch can be hard to manage since there are so many active loops involved, but once you get the hang of it, it's easy. It's important that you pay attention to how many loops you are creating and make sure that they are not becoming twisted or crossed. Keeping them organized and neat will ensure your project turns out flat, the shape is proper. Triple treble crochet stitch. This stitch is another large crochet stitch. As you get into these larger stitches, you can expect that they will not be used or seen in patterns often. However, it is important to know how to do them so that should they come up, you know what you are doing. This stitch is extremely long, and it is very important that you make sure your loops stay organized and neat, or you will end up with a mess of knots ruining your project. Here is how you can do the triple treble crochet with that in mind. 1. Start by putting the yarn over your hook 4 times, giving you a total of 5 active loops. 2. Insert the hook into the next working stitch and grab the yarn. Draw it through the working stitch. You should have a total of 6 active loops now. 3. Next, hook the yarn again and draw it through the first 2 active stitches on the hook. You should be left with 5 active loops now. 4. Grab the yarn again and draw it through the first 2 stitches on the hook again, leaving you with 4 active loops. 5. Continue doing this until you are left with just 1 active loop on the hook, as you have with all of the other stitches prior to this one. Again, this stitch type is extremely rare, and it is unlikely that you will use it very often, but it is still a good one to know. It is more common in Afghans and looser style patterns. Tunisian crochet stitches. There are actually 4 different styles of Tunisian crochet stitches. All of these will be used in different settings, and you can even find patterns that will use Tunisian crochet stitches exclusively. These stitches are pretty easy and create beautiful patterns and projects. They may not be as common in regular patterns, but you will likely come across them at some point or another in your crocheting journey. Tunisian knit stitch. The Tunisian knit stitch looks very similar to the stockinette stitch when you are knitting. This stitch is a very clean and classic style stitch, and despite its name, it is actually a crochet stitch. Here's how you do it. 1. Start with a chain. Turn your project and enter the working stitch, that is 2 stitches away from your hook. Grab the yarn and pull it through. Keep doing this all the way across your project. You should end up with several active loops. 2. When you get to the end, hook the yarn and pull it through the first 2 active loops on the hook, as though you are completing a single crochet stitch. 3. Keep doing this, hooking the yarn and pulling it through the first 2 loops, active loops, on your hook until you reach the end of your project. 4. You can do this as many or as few times as the pattern calls for. Once your project begins to grow, you will begin to notice it looks like a knitted project, hence the name Tunisian knit stitch. This crocheting stitch is a great way to create a pattern that looks knitted, even though you are using a crochet hook. There are many patterns that use this stitch style if you look, though it is not common unless you actually look for it. Tunisian reverse stitch. The Tunisian reverse stitch uses the back of the stitches to create gathered-looking loops on your project. The outcome is a pulled-together fabric that looks evenly textured and shaped. It is unique and very attractive, and isn't all too hard to learn either. 1. Start by chaining as many chain stitches as you desire. 2. For the first row of your project, do the Tunisian knit style. 3. Now with the second row, you will want to enter the hook through the back of the stitches, from side to side. That vertical bar that comes up between stitches, hook through that. Do that all the way across the row. 4. At the end of the row, hook the yarn and pull it back through one loop, then hook the yarn and pull it back through 2 loops. Continue hooking the yarn and pulling it back through 2 loops until you are left with 1 active loop. 5. Continue alternating between row 1 and row 2 for your project. This stitch creates a very solid and gathered style fabric that is extremely attractive to look at. It is also very soft and thick to the touch. As with all Tunisian stitches, this one isn't extremely popular in basic projects, but it is if you find the right projects to use it with. Front crochet stitch. This stitch style can be combined with virtually any other style of stitch, except for a back crochet stitch. When you are looking to do a front crochet stitch, take your project and turn it so that the top of the last row you completed is facing you. If you have only completed a chain, then single stitch across the first row and then turn the project so that the top of the last row is facing you. Notice that each stitch has 2 sides, a front and a back side. Essentially, you will be looking at a loop that has been laid flat by being threaded with another loop. What this leaves is 1/2 of the loop in the front facing you, and 1/2 of the loop in the back facing away from you. A front crochet stitch simply means that you are going in through the front loop only. Most patterns will indicate what stitch style you should do within that front loop. Back crochet stitch. The back crochet stitch follows the same rules as the front crochet stitch. If you are holding your project, look at the top of it. If you have only a chain, single crochet stitch across an entire row and then turn it so you're looking down at the top of your project. You will see that each loop has been laid flat and 1/2 of each loop is separated by another loop being pulled through it. The back loop is the half that is facing away from you. To complete a back crochet stitch, simply enter through this back loop and complete whatever stitch type has been indicated in the pattern. As you can see, there are a number of different crochet stitches you can complete. This guide is not exhaustive, so you may run into even more of them when you are actually crocheting projects. However, as a beginner, you will likely not run into any stitch styles that have not been listed here. These stitches are among the easiest of crochet stitches. Once you master these, learning any other stitch type in crochet should be a breeze. These stitches are all simple, as long as you take a short amount of time to invest in learning exactly how to do them. Remember, you never want to let your active loops or your project become twisted, crossed, or turned around while you are working, as this will destroy what you are working on. Keep your tension light and consistent, so that your project lays flat and is not twisted or tight in areas. A tight tension traded for a loose tension throughout your project will end up in you having a pattern that will be significantly smaller in some areas than it will be in others. Generally, most projects require that you keep the tension the same so that this doesn't happen, as doing this can ruin your project. When you are practicing, it can be helpful to simply work on samples. Samples are small squares that you can do where you just try out different stitch styles and master them. Doing this gives you the freedom to do whatever you want without fear of wrecking a project that you invest a lot of time into. Once you master each stitch style, you can go look for projects that feature these stitches and use your newfound knowledge to create beautiful work. If you are having a difficult time remembering how all of the different stitches are meant to be created, you can keep this handy chapter available to you so that you can refer back to it for information on what to do. That way, you always have instant and easy access on how to complete various beginners' stitches. Chapter 5. How to read a pattern. Learning how to read a crochet pattern can be intimidating and difficult. Once you learn what you are doing, however, it becomes extremely easy to grasp it, and in no time you'll be creating beautiful pieces of artwork. It may take you a few tries, and you may find that you completely botch the first few projects you try to create based on a pattern. This is completely normal when you are getting the hang of the crocheting language, and you should know that you are not alone in that. However, once you figure out what you are doing, it will become extremely easy, and in no time you'll be navigating your way through any crocheting pattern that you come across. Where to start? The best thing to do is to start with an extremely beginner project for your very first one. There will be many different styles of beginner projects that you can try, but ideally you should go with the absolute easiest one if it is your very first time. Dishcloths, scarves, small flowers, headbands, and other simple things are a great place to start. The easier you start, the easier you will be able to read what you are doing and get the hang of it. Then, it will be a lot simpler when you move on to doing more intricate projects, like toques and other fascinating things. Another tip for picking a pattern is to have one that comes along with a picture tutorial or a video tutorial that you can refer back to when you are feeling stuck. The first time around, you may want to rely on this tutorial. However, you should start working on reading the pattern on its own and turning to the tutorial only when you are really struggling if you want to master pattern reading and be able to read any patterns out there, even your grandma's. Look the pattern over. Before you rush into your pattern, take a good look at it. Try and understand everything that you can right away, and then get clear on what you are going to be expected to do. Many beginners start a project thinking it will be easy and realise it is not quite as easy as they thought it would be. This even happens with projects that are aimed at beginners. By reading through the pattern first, you can decide whether or not it is something you'll be able to do. Once you've found out that you can do, make sure you give it a good read through and completely understand what it requires you to do. This will help you look forward to what you are doing and uncover the mysteries before you get to them. The first spot you are going to want to look at is the information about the pattern. What type of yarn do you need to have, and what weight is it in? What size of a hook do you need? Do you have these things? Then you are going to want to check and see if there are any notes on the pattern. Often the pattern creators will leave notes on it to help you understand what they have done more clearly. These notes can help prevent you from making common or simple mistakes that ruin your project, and can also help you decide if the project is right for you. In the online space, there are many forums where you can find projects. If this is where you have found yours, look to see if any other users have completed this project and what their reviews were. If it was simple, understandable, and turned out properly, it is likely that you have chosen a good pattern. However, if it is a difficult one to read, doesn't turn out properly, or is missing a part, then you will know that you should look on until you find a different project that will be easier for you to finish. Once you understand what you need to get started, you should read through the actual pattern itself. In it, you will figure out what type of stitches are needed, how many stitches, and how many rows you will need to accomplish. Reading the pattern will help you discover if there are any unique stitches you will need to learn, and will give you a chance to uncover abbreviations before you get to them. And without playing the guessing game. If you are having a hard time remembering what these abbreviations mean, the next chapter of this book contains a handy little abbreviation guide that will help you discover everything you need to know. Another thing you need to check before you get started is to understand where this pattern was created. The United States and the United Kingdom use different terminology and abbreviations for their patterns, so you may have a hard time reading a United Kingdom pattern if you are trained to read the United States patterns instead. Some designers offer both United Kingdom and United States variations so that anyone can complete them. However, this is not always available. Finally, some patterns have direct access to the designers or those who created them. It is a good idea to check and see if this is the case for your pattern, because if it is, then it means you may be able to message the designer and seek assistance if you are having difficulties. For most beginner projects, you will not need to do this. However, the better you get and the more advanced projects you take on, the handier this little tip becomes. Tips about yarns. It is important to make sure you have the proper yarn weight when you are starting the project. Having the proper yarn type is also important in many cases, though in others it won't matter if you interchange what you use. The most important thing generally is the weight. Another thing you are going to want to pay attention to with yarn is batch number. If you are purchasing multiple balls in the same colour for the same pattern, make sure that they have the same batch number. Even the same colour of yarn can have slight variations that may not be noticed until they're lying directly next to each other in a pattern. To prevent your project from being ruined by this simple mistake, just make sure that all of your balls of yarn are from the same batch. The importance of gauge and tension. Every pattern you read will feature a gauge. This gauge allows you to ensure that you have the right yarn weight, hook size and tension combination to complete the project effectively. This gauge gives you the opportunity to quickly check and make sure that your project is going to turn out as it is intended to. The gauge section generally reads something like this. 14 stitches equals 10 centimeters. 7 rows equals 10 centimeters. In single crochet stitch using a size H hook. The gauge may read slightly different across various patterns, but for the most part, you can expect to find all of that information within the gauge section of your pattern. It is important that you look at this gauge and ensure that you are within it in order to make sure your pattern turns out properly. Ignoring the gauge can wind up with you having an excessively large or extremely small project in compared to what you were intending to create. In order to check your gauge, it is really simple. Start by chaining the number of stitches recommended in the gauge. For example, above, you are recommended to stitch 14 stitches, STS, in order to create the 10 cm size. You will want to chain 15, as you always chain one more stitch than needed in order to ensure that you don't accidentally lose a stitch when you are turning your project around. Then, turn it around and stitch across in the recommended stitch style, in this case a single crochet stitch. Then you can create the number of rows that are recommended. Tie off and measure your square. If the square, also known as a swatch, is the same as the gauge, as it should be, then you are good to go. If it is not, you will need to make necessary changes to fix that. If your gauge does not match, the first thing you should do is make sure you are using the correct hook size and yarn weight. If you are, then the next thing you should do is check your tension. To fix your tension accordingly, you will need to do one of two things. If your swatch was too large, you will need to tighten your tension up. If your swatch was too small, though, you will need to do the opposite and loosen up your tension. Sometimes you have the swatch completed and you are using the proper yarn weight and hook size, but your swatch still doesn't turn out right. Even with the differences of tension, you still can't seem to get the proper gauge. If this is the case, there are two things you can do to correct this problem. First, if your project is too small, you can move up one hook size and try the gauge again. Second, if your project is too large, you can move down one hook size and try the gauge again. There is no real explanation as to why this sometimes happens, but occasionally you will have to use a different hook than the one described in the pattern to get the proper outcome. Don't worry about it, just make the appropriate change and carry on. Once you figure out what the proper gauge is for you, you will be good to go. It can be very easy to want to skip over the gauge portion of a project and dive into the project itself, but it is important that you don't do this. This is a rookie mistake and can lead to a disastrous outcome of wasted time and resources if you are not spot on with your gauge. It is a good idea to take the extra 10 to 15 minutes and create a quick little swatch to make sure that you are well prepared to master the project that lies ahead of you. Understand the abbreviations. In the next chapter, you will find a fast and easy guide to follow that will tell you exactly what abbreviations you need to know, no matter what pattern you are preparing to read. Still, there is some important information about abbreviations that you should know as a beginner. First is that you are going to definitely have abbreviations in your project. Sometimes it can be very hard because the majority of the project will be written in abbreviations, and it can feel like you are reading in another language. If it helps at first, you may want to rewrite the patterns without the abbreviations, so that you can understand what they all mean as you go along. Over time, however, you will find that reading patterns comes easily to you, and you will be able to fluently understand what all the abbreviations mean. It can be very tricky to understand what patterns mean at first, but it is a good idea to practice reading them right away. The abbreviations used across patterns varies depending on what type of stitches are used and other contributing factors. You will find that the more advanced you get, the more abbreviations you will find in your patterns. Ideally, you will master the abbreviations at a basic level so that each new abbreviation is easy for you to learn. Again, the next chapter features an incredible abbreviation guide that will help you understand exactly what every single abbreviation in your pattern means. Practice the special stitches first. If there are any special stitches in your pattern, you are going to want to practice these before you dive into your project. Sometimes it can be hard to really master these, and you don't want a few simple mistakes to cause a problem with your pattern. You will find most of the stitches that you might find in beginners' projects in the previous chapter, so feel free to go back and find the instructions and practice. If you're looking for a good spot to practice these, you can simply expand on the swatch you've already started. Once you get the hang of all of the special stitching in your projects, you will be sure that when you come across them in your pattern, that you know what you are doing. Practice reading. The best way to practice reading patterns is to start out with ones that are incredibly basic. Granny squares are an excellent pattern to start with because they are small and simple and can incorporate any number of stitches. They allow you the opportunity to practice reading patterns really well, too, because they are usually short projects that only take half an hour to an hour at most. If you really want to, you can pick a few granny squares to practice with and create a few of each, then sew them together to create a small afghan. Remember, at first you are probably going to struggle to understand the language of crochet patterns, especially to someone who hasn't read a pattern before. It can feel a lot like you are learning a completely new language. Take your time and start with something small, so that if you botch it, it is easy to undo and start over again. You won't want to make a mistake halfway through a large project that you've invested a lot of time into and then have to completely unravel it to fix your mistake. That just gets frustrating. Go ahead and get started. Once you have mastered granny squares and feel comfortable with reading patterns and creating various styles, you are most likely ready to go ahead and get going with your project. Go ahead and find yourself a beginner's pattern and get started on it. Again, remember that if you have any concerns or curiosities, this book contains excellent guides on how to complete various stitches, as well as what the different abbreviations mean. Take your time and it will turn out amazingly. Reading patterns can feel intimidating and hard at first, but if you take your time and practice mastering the reading before you take on a larger project, it makes it a lot easier. The more you understand the language of crochet, the easier it will be for you to create any project that you desire. As you learn to master the beginner level projects, you will be able to move up to harder ones. The more advanced you get, the more stitches you will have to learn, so make sure you gradually introduce yourself to the advanced levels and don't just dive right in. Doing so can waste your time, money and energy as you work to create a project that you aren't quite ready to complete. However, if you take the time to practice, you will be comfortably whipping up those difficult projects in no time. Chapter 6, Abbreviation Guide. There are a ton of abbreviations in crochet that you are going to come across. This list is not entirely exhaustive, though it will contain everything you need to know for any beginner's project you may wish to complete. As a rule of thumb, most beginners' projects will not contain the more difficult stitches and manoeuvres, and therefore you will not need to know what their abbreviations are. Abbreviation Guide. Abbreviation description. Square brackets. You need to work the instructions described between the brackets as many times as you are directed to. Round brackets. You need to work the instructions described between the parentheses as many times as you are directed to. Asterisk. Following an asterisk, there will be instructions. Repeat these as many times as you are directed to. Two asterisks. Between the asterisks, there will be instructions. You are to repeat these as many times as you are directed to. Inverted commas. Inch, inches. ALT, alternate. Approx, approximately. BEG, beginning, begin. BET, between. BL, back loop, loops. BO, bobble. BP, back post, the vertical bar between stitches, enter from the back. BP, DC, back post double crochet. BPSC, back post single crochet. BPTR, back post treble or triple crochet. CA, colour A. CB, CC. CC, contrasting colour. CH, chain stitch. CH dash. This means to a chain or space that was previously made. You will see it written like CH-1 space, which means one chain space. CH-SP, chain space. CL, cluster. CM, centimetre, centimetres. CONT, continue. DC, double crochet. DC2 TOG, double crochet 2 stitches together. DEC, decreases, decreasing, decrease. DTR, double triple. FL, front loops. FOLL, following, follow, follows. FP, front post, the vertical bar between posts, enter from the front. FPDC, front post double crochet. FPSC, front post single crochet. FPTR, front post treble crochet. G, gram. HDC, half double crochet. INC, increases, increasing, increase. LPS, loop, loops. M, meter, meters. MC, main colour. Millimetre, millimetres. OZ, ounce, ounces. PAT, S or pat, or PATT, pattern. PM, place marker, used in circular projects as a way to ensure you remember where the beginning of the project is. Something like a paperclip will work. PREV, previous. REM, remaining, remain, remains. REP, repeat, repeats. RND, S, round, rounds. RS, right side, front side of your project based on what side you started on. SC, single crochet stitch. SC, 2, TOG, single crochet 2 stitches together. SK, skip. SL, ST, slip stitch. SP, S, space, spaces. ST, S, stitch, stitches. TCH or T-CH, turning chain, the stitches you do at the end of a row to turn the project without shortening it. TBL, through back loop. TOG, together. TR, triple crochet. TR, triple treble crochet. WS, wrong side, the side facing away from you based on what side you started the project on. YD, YDS, yards. YO, yarn over, pull yarn over the hook. YOH, yarn over hook. It may seem as though there are a lot of abbreviations, but once you get the hang of it, you will find it is incredibly easy to read patterns. At first, it may seem like there are almost too many abbreviations. A great way to practice is to start by simply reading the patterns out loud to yourself. So, instead of reading the abbreviations, read what they mean out loud. The more you practice this, the easier it will be to understand them. You can even do this with harder patterns as you practice understanding everything, so that the more advanced you become, the easier it is to read the new abbreviations you will learn about with additional stitch styles. Chapter 7. Tips and Tricks. As a beginner, it can seem like there is a lot to take in at first. Once you get used to it, however, it will become a lot easier for you to crochet easily. With learning a new crafting style as well as a new language for reading in, it can be difficult at first. As you continue, it will become easier really quick. Crocheting can seem like a daunting thing to learn at first, but when you are actually physically practicing it, you will see that it really is not. Of course, tips and tricks can always be handy when you are learning a new craft, and so this chapter has been curated to help make this new skill even easier for you to learn. Practicing these tips and tricks in your crocheting skill building will help make it easier and more effective in regards to making it a quick and easy learning process. Take regular breaks. It can be very easy to get frustrated or confused when you are creating a new project, especially when you are new to crochet. It can get hard to understand all of the abbreviations, and it can easily turn into a difficult thing to do. Instead of becoming extremely grumpy with your project or feeling excessively frustrated, the best thing to do is take a break. You can set your project down for a few minutes or set it aside for the rest of the day. The best thing to do is to take your short and frequent breaks as needed, as it will help you feel more relaxed when you are practicing your crochet skills, and it will make the experience more enjoyable overall. Always do swatches. It doesn't matter what experience level you are when it comes to crocheting. It is very important that you are always doing swatches before you dive into patterns. Many times you will be creating a pattern and for whatever reason the gauge is not accurate, even if you are using the same products as the original designer of the pattern was. If you do not create swatches for a gauge guide, you will regularly end up with oddly sized patterns that are either too large or too small for what you were intending to create. Instead of wasting your time and resources and becoming frustrated, simply make sure you are always doing your swatches. These are also a great opportunity to practice new stitches or ones that you may not be as familiar. That way, when you come across them in your patterns, you will be prepared to master them. Count your rows. It can be really easy to forget what row you are on or where you left off when you set your project down last. If you are not keeping track of what row you are on, it can be easy to completely forget and end up with several rows added or missing. A great way to keep track of what row you are on is to use a notebook and simply make a strike every time you complete a row, and keep an ongoing tally of what row you are on. This way you will know exactly where you are and where you left off, and your project will turn out perfectly. Count your stitches. Just like with rows, it can be easy to forget how many stitches you are making. It is a good idea to count how many stitches you are putting in each row to ensure you aren't accidentally adding or losing any. As well, you need to make sure that you are accurately completing the proper amount of stitches for certain segments of your project. Again, sometimes the easiest way to do this is to keep track in a notebook for where you are in a row, particularly if the row is rather difficult or contains several stitch variations. Join a group. There are many groups available for people who crochet to join. This is a great idea as it is an excellent opportunity to gain access to an enormous amount of support from others who are also into crocheting. Often these groups are loaded with people who are extremely good at what they are doing, and therefore they will be able to effortlessly guide you through the ranks as you learn to master the art of crochet. These are also a great area to share your work, gain advice, and find new patterns to work on if you are feeling short from inspiration. Practice effective storage. It is a good idea to make sure that you have effective storage measures in place for your crocheting items. Even if you only have a few, you will want to carefully store them away. Yarn can easily pick up dirt and debris, so you will want to keep it somewhere where it will stay clean and won't end up acquiring dirt particles that will get stitched into your project. As well, crocheting projects that aren't stored effectively can quickly become twisted and tangled, which can lead to incredible frustration when you are trying to pick your project back up from where you left off. Having a specific container that you lay your projects into is a good idea. As well, you will want to make sure that your active projects are kept away from other projects. Finally, it is a good idea to put some form of placeholder into your active loop so that you don't accidentally drop it while it is being stored. Practicing these simple storage methods will help save you a major headache later and in between your projects. Mind your posture. It is easy to slouch over and have terrible posture when you are crocheting. We tend to get our shoulders up tight and our heads hang low so we can see what we are doing. However, if you sit in this posture for a long period of time, you are likely to have terrible back pains and neck pains when you are done crocheting. A better idea is to mind your posture. At the end of each row, check your back and shoulders as well as your arm and neck and make sure that you are sitting in a comfortable and healthy posture so that you will not suffer later on. The more you practice this healthy posture in the beginning, the easier it will be to maintain throughout your entire crocheting hobby. Stretch your hands and fingers out. It can be easy to forget to do this and then wind up with stiff hands and cramps in between your fingers and in your wrists. It is important to regularly stop and stretch out your hands and fingers when you are crocheting. In fact, it's a good idea to regularly stop and stretch out your entire body. Doing this will help keep you from getting any stiffness or cramps from crocheting for long periods of time. Always pay attention to tension. It can be easy to forget about your tension and wind up pulling it tighter or letting it fall looser than normal. Doing this can ruin your project though, so you want to make sure that you aren't forgetting about your tension. Make sure it stays consistent throughout your entire project so that it lays flat and doesn't end up with small tight parts and big loose parts. Try a yarn bowl. Some people make special yarn bowls which are crafted for yarn to sit inside of it. Then you hook the active strand through a small hole on the side of the bowl which holds it in place for you. This way your yarn doesn't fall all over the place and it is easy to unravel as you go along. It makes the management of the yarn ball effortless while you are crocheting, which can hugely contribute to the consistency of your tension throughout your project. Take your time. When you are working on your projects, it is a good idea to take your time. It can be easy to want to rush through, but this makes you more likely to miss out on stitches, forget rows, or miss on special recommendations on your pattern. The best thing you can do is go slow and make sure you are regularly checking back to your pattern so you don't miss important steps and so that your pattern turns out perfectly. Just wing it. Sometimes you're going to have no idea what you're doing or if you're doing it right. The best thing you can do at this time is just wing it and see how it turns out in the end. Most of the time, if you make a calculated judgment, it will turn out right, even if it doesn't go exactly the way the pattern intended for it to go. Then you can also get an idea as to what worked and what didn't, and gain your experience and knowledge for future endeavours. Keep a notebook handy. It is very important to keep a notebook handy whenever you are doing crochet. This is true for advanced and novice crocheting individuals. Having a notebook handy allows you to take notes on your patterns, create your own, write down what works and what doesn't, and keep track of everything you've done to date. It is also a great opportunity to take a look at how far you have come in your crocheting journey. There are many additional tips and tricks you can use in order to make sure your projects turn out properly, and that your experience with crocheting is enjoyable and easy. These will be the best for you to focus on as you are getting started, and you will probably learn many of your own tips and tricks along the way. The more you practice, the more you will learn yourself, and you will be able to create your own judgment as to what works for you and what doesn't. Conclusion. Crocheting is an enjoyable yarn craft that is really easy to learn. Although it used to be commonly thought about as a craft mainly for elders, it is now a craft that is loved by many. Perhaps it was the 1960s and 1970s that turned it into the popular expressional art form that it is regarded as today. During that time, it was recognized as a free-form craft that allowed crafters to create virtually anything they desired. The exact origins of crocheting is unknown, but it has evolved immensely since we learned about its first official print appearance in 1824. It has clearly grown since then, and the patterns have become more accurate and more reliable. If a person of today's crocheting generation were to try and depict the patterns from the original prints, they would likely go crazy trying to create an accurate project. Nowadays, though, you can create virtually everything, and patterns are almost always accurate. In order to ensure absolute accuracy, you need to make sure that you are paying attention to the gauge and creating one every single time. This will prevent you from making an accidental mistake that could destroy your entire project. There are many different stitches you can learn, but as a beginner, you will likely find that there are only a few you can see regularly across all of the beginner's patterns. This makes it incredibly easy to learn. Remember, if you are becoming frustrated or sore from sitting too long, take a break. You can always come back to your project later. Crocheting should be an enjoyable and relaxing art form, and not something that becomes stressful or causes you physical pain. I hope that you were able to learn enough from this book to be able to effectively create yourself some incredible crocheting patterns. By now, you should be able to easily read patterns and create fabulous projects as a result. I hope the abbreviations are easy for you to depict, now that you have a thorough abbreviation guide for you to follow. The next thing for you to do is to find yourself some beginner's projects to work on and practice reading patterns and creating them. The more hands-on practice you get, the better your crocheting skills will be. Finally, if you enjoyed this book, please take the time to post an honest review on Amazon. Your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy crocheting.